Let me tell you about the insane 570 feet tall roller coaster that never happened. And this insane looking roller coaster was part of the so-called Polercoaster model that started being a collaboration between US Thrill Rides and S&S worldwide. But then everything went wrong and all of these several roller coaster projects went underground. Hear everything in this video. Now going all the way back to the 2011 IAAPA trade show in Orlando, Florida. And this is where the so-called Polercoaster was announced as a joint venture between US Thrill Rides and S&S Worldwide. And this is where the CEO of US Thrill Rides, Bill Kitchen, was pleased with the ride's initial reception at the show, stating, "We should have firm contracts signed by the end of the year." And he said this calmly with the anticipation of at least one installation would open in 2014. And the first contracts were announced in late 2013 with design and construction expected to last 24 months. And then the so-called Lake Point sporting community in Georgia was announced as the first installation of a Polercoaster. And this Polercoaster design, which was set to debut in 2015, would have stood approximately 325 feet, and that is 99 meters tall. But then sadly the project stalled. However, as of December 1st, 2015, there was no mention of the Polercoaster on Lake Point Sporting Community's website. And it already seemed like back in 2015 that there were many problems with this coaster design. And already in 2015, the US Thrill Rides company had changed the manufacturer to Intamin, and on top of that their first project was already cancelled. So the Polercoaster concept was not up to a good start. But then surprisingly, a second sale of the Polercoaster was confirmed for a Florida location at the IAAPA trade show in 2013. And the location was officially confirmed on June 5th, 2014. And the first Polercoaster project was going to the so-called New Mango's Tropical Cafe development project on International Drive in Orlando, Florida. And let me just take a quick briefer because that was a very lengthy name. And now the official name for this record-breaking roller coaster was Skyscraper. And the ride was to stand 570 feet tall, and that is 170 meters. And this roller coaster would have begun with a crazy inversion at its maximum height. And that would have actually meant that Skyscraper would have become the tallest roller coaster in the world, beating the now defunct 456 foot tall Kingda Ka. And as I've said just before, this roller coaster would have also featured the highest elevated inversion in the world, surpassing the 197 feet tall / 60 meter inversion on Kennywood's steel curtain. And then Skyscraper was of course also said to be among one of the longest roller coasters in the world, with a track length of approximately 5,200 feet, and that is 1,600 meters. And then Skyscraper's first drop of 123 degrees would have also set the record for steepness, and it would have also become the first roller coaster in the world to feature 2 beyond vertical drops. But then the developers anticipated a completion by 2016, but then a number of delays resulted in the date being pushed back several times. But then sadly by 2019, the status of this enormous project fell into uncertainty with the removal of the project's website and lack of updates from developers. Then surprisingly, back in 2016 they have also talked about adding virtual reality headsets to the Skyscraper roller coaster. So then in between 2016 and 2019, this roller coaster project really just seemed to be some ideas from some people. But then surprisingly, it was a fact that by April 2017, portions of the roller coaster's track had been completed by Intamin, and then the roller coaster track was placed in storage. But now we know that this so-called Skyscraper project was not just an idea, and Intamin was really determined to make this roller coaster a reality. But then sadly the project went downhill again because the construction of the complex was put to an indefinite hold pending permit approval, which did not go as expected. And in my opinion, it isn't really the best idea starting to create a roller coaster before getting the permit for the location. And then surprisingly in January 2019 we got some news, and Skyplex's budget was sadly scaled back from $500 million to $250 million. But then what could they do with this Skyscraper project with only half of the budget? The plans were actually to retain the Skyscraper's original coaster design but include less retail development around the base of the structure. And then the complex opening date was yet again pushed back further to 2020, and that didn't even include the rides. They will open sometime later. And then sadly by June 2019 the website promoting this project was taken down. And then surprisingly reports surfaced in 2020 that Universal used a variety of legal tactics to derail this project. This very ambitious ride complex with the so-called Skyscraper roller coaster was actually a competitor to the Universal parks. And even though this is a shady statement or thing to do, I can actually see why they could have done it. To this day in 2025, we don't really know if these reports were true. All we can say is the last update from the developers on Facebook was in December 2017. Surprisingly, their official Twitter account, now known as X, went silent back in 2015. And it was also announced back in January 2019 that the Skyplex project as a whole had been scaled back. But now surprisingly, the size of the tower and the 2020 opening date would remain unchanged. And with no surprise, this project didn't see the light in 2020. But then surprisingly in 2021, Joshua Wallach revealed that Wallach Holdings had signed a licensing deal with Lionsgate Entertainment to open Skyplex as a Lionsgate Entertainment World Resort, and this entertainment resort was going to be centered around this humongous skyscraper roller coaster. But unfortunately the project lost its financing in early 2020 as theme parks in Florida were forced to be closed due to COVID-19 pandemic. And it is very interesting to see how this Skyplex and skyscraper roller coaster project was thrown around these different companies. And remember, this Lionsgate Entertainment World Resort idea came 10 years after the first skyscraper roller coaster idea. Now sorry for the pronunciation, but in late 2021, Wallach Holdings still held the licensing deal, and Joshua Wallach said that while he still wanted to build a roller coaster on the property, practical considerations had him considering other uses for the site, such as a resort. But this was only gonna be a resort with hotels to support the nearby upcoming Universal Epic Universe theme park. But now we had yet another great reason to why Universal could have been a huge factor in this cancellation process. And Universal had already big plans for their upcoming theme park Epic Universe that will open in 2025. And Epic Universe will officially open in May 2025. And then weirdly enough, in July 2022, it was announced that US Thrill Rides, the ride's designer, had filed a lawsuit with Intamin for alleged misappropriation of trade secrets and copyright infringement over a roller coaster designed and built by Intamin. And this Intamin roller coaster creation is located at the Dubai Hills Estate Mall, and this is where the company US Thrill Rides claims this roller coaster to be a direct copy of the Polercoaster. And US Thrill Rides is of course the company that had the official blueprint for this Polercoaster. And this is where the Swiss manufacturer Intamin had the task of creating this roller coaster and bringing it to life. And the roller coaster they are talking about is the so-called Storm Coaster that features the world's fastest vertical launch, reaching 77 km/h, and that is 48 mph. And that is really very impressive, taking such a heavy roller coaster train up a vertical launch with that speed. But then with no surprise, US Thrill Rides failed this lawsuit. But then on December 21st, 2022, US Thrill Rides and the Polercoaster and all other companies behind the project filed for bankruptcy. So overall, after many failed attempts, all of these so-called Polercoaster projects were cancelled. But as of today, you can still find the Polercoaster somewhere. A company called MV Rides has actually purchased the Polercoaster blueprint, and on their official webpage you can see the different designs and sizes they can create with this ride concept. This so-called Polercoaster concept can have a height between 200 and 1000 feet. And now depending on the size of this roller coaster, the layout can feature 4 to 12 elements, and the passenger trains can also feature 4 to 12 riders. So somewhere in the near future, this so-called Polercoaster concept can still be brought to life. And that's how we end the story of this insane skyscraper roller coaster design. And if you really like this kind of video, please consider subscribing to the channel for way more videos like these. And now at the end of the day, I'm always gonna say bye bye.